to the virtual world of the Eastside Freedom Library. I'm Peter Ratcliffe, the co-executive director, and my colleague Bailey Athier is handling the tech today. We are live in Zoom. Bailey is also live streaming to Facebook and recording for what will be an archived video on the Eastside Freedom Library's YouTube page. If you are an audience member today, we ask you to keep your microphones muted. We encourage you to turn on your video. I don't know what your experiences have been with presenting in Zoom settings, but it can be kind of discouraging to look at black boxes. It's nicer to see faces. We will, sort of the plans are Bill Hendrickson, who is a staff person with SAG-AFTRA. Bill is going to set the stage, no pun intended. And then our representatives from particular unions, and that will be Mark Bradley speaking particularly about Actors Equity, Casey Lewis about SAG-AFTRA, Kelly Larson about IATSE, Pat Landers about United Scenic Artists and IATSE. Am I forgetting anyone? I think, oh, Brad Egan from the Musicians Union. And then Bill Hendrickson is going to tell us a little bit about an ongoing project to strengthen the solidarity relationships among the different unions in the entertainment industry. And then you, the audience members, will be invited to ask questions or make comments, probably by typing into the chat here on Zoom, or if you're with us on Facebook, the comment function on Facebook. But we'll see how large the group is, and we might just have everyone unmute and wave their flesh and blood hand or raise their mechanical hand to participate in the conversation. So, you know, we have all been living in this pandemic now for 2 years. We know that some industries have been hit harder than others. And we also know that there's been new organizing going on in some of the industries where workers have been feeling the pressures of the pandemic, or that the pandemic has brought into sharper relief the kinds of issues and pressures that they had been feeling all along. So many of us have some connection to the entertainment industry as consumers, as theater goers, as movie viewers, all the ways that we might engage with entertainment. And many of us are also aware that it doesn't just happen by itself, but that labor is involved in making things happen. And not just the labor of the handsome and beautiful and compelling presences that show up on stage or on screen, but also a tremendous amount of labor that goes on behind the scene, and that makes it possible for us to enjoy the entertainment that we access. So the Eastside Freedom Library is an organization that really wants to be at the intersection of many things, the intersection of the past and the present, the intersection of different communities, the intersections between the labor movement and our immigrant neighbors, and I think the intersection between education and entertainment. And this is an opportunity for those of us who are not directly in the industry to get some education today, and also hopefully an opportunity for people within the industry to get a better sense of what others are doing and how they might get involved to make work and life better. So I'm going to turn things over to Bill Hendrickson, who's going to set the stage for us a little bit. Bill.
All right. Thank you for the introduction. Let me move my outline over here so I can make sure I don't miss any points. Yeah, so what we're here to talk about is a very new group that we're working with the Minnesota State AFL-CIO to form. It doesn't even have a name yet. But what it is, it's like a caucus, for lack of a better word, a caucus of unions affiliated with the entertainment industry. Because these are not big unions in Minnesota, like numbers wise, like we're the SAG-AFTRA local. I should have mentioned that I'm with SAG-AFTRA, the Screen Actors Guild and American Federation of Television and Radio Artists. I'm the administrative director for the Twin Cities local. But a lot of this came about in 2020 and especially in 2021 as we were pushing for a film production tax credit in Minnesota. And without getting too far into the film production tax credits, it's one of the main drivers for when a movie or a TV show or a commercial gets made in a place. It's one of the first things they look for. So it was a necessary component to really get back to a place where movies are being made in Minnesota. And during that time, we reached out to Minnesota Film and TV, and they kind of connected us with some other folks. We met Brian Simpson from IATSE, who is a colleague of Kelly Larson, who's on this call. And the more we networked with our fellow unions, we talked to the AFL-CIO, and we got set up with, they made a lot of introductions to folks in other unions that we hadn't dealt with a lot. We hadn't had a lot of person-to-person interaction because it seemed like our industries were so separate. And then the more we, got to doing this, we realized that, fully realized how many unions are involved in making anything, whether it's a movie or a play or a commercial. It's, there's your cast and there's your crew, and it is so multifaceted that, we're looking around and we get this film tax credit. We win it. The governor signs it, and we had all this great momentum. And so we were looking for a way to keep that momentum going. And I was familiar with the group in Chicago, with the Chicago Federation of Labor. It's the CEILC, the Chicago Entertainment Industry Labor Council. And it's a much more formal organization there, but the concept of it is it's a place for these much smaller unions to get together to make their voices heard and to understand one another's issues. And I'm going to talk a little bit later about the kind of the nuts and bolts for how we see this working, and some of the potential uses for it and strengths. But for right now, I believe Peter is going to kick it over to some of the folks from the individual unions who are going to take part in this, and they're going to talk about their union's role.
Thank you, Bill. So we're going to start with Mark Bradley, and Mark is wearing 2 of his 3 union buttons today. So Mark is a dues payer with Actors Equity and SAG-AFTRA, and even more. So, and I've known Mark a long time. So Mark, you want to tell us what's going on with Actors Equity?
Yeah, I asked to go first, mostly because of chronology, as you'll find out when Casey follows me. I'm a member, as Peter said, of SAG-AFTRA and of Equity. I'm the first vice president of the SAG-AFTRA local. I also sit on the national SAG-AFTRA organizing committee. And I'm also a member of the Equity Liaison Committee. Equity does not have locals, but we do have local liaison committees for local members. A little bit of history. The Actors Equity Association represents actors and stage managers in live theater. In the early 20th century, stars of the theater lived like kings and queens. but ordinary working actors were terribly exploited. They had to provide their own costumes. They weren't paid for rehearsals, and they were often stranded on the road without being paid at all. It was unfair. It was inequitable. Hence the name Actors' Equity, which was founded in 1913 and won recognition from the producers after the famous Broadway strike of 1919. I found an editorial from the New Republic from that period, which speaks to the need for a union of working actors, but I think it can also apply to other unions as well. Quote, an actors' labor union, it sounds strange, almost as strange as a union of poets or portrait painters. The mere idea of it has long kept actors from organizing. The actor is hired as a highly skilled workman. In aesthetics, he is beyond question an artist, but in economics, he is an artisan, a wage earner, a member of a trade. As an economic unit, he is exactly in the position of the hod carrier. He has at last recognized the fact, as the hod carrier recognized some years ago, end quote. Today, Equity represents about 600 actors and stage managers in Minnesota, and we're dealing with several important issues, among them diversity and inclusion, and the safe reopening of theaters after the worst of COVID. Thanks.
Thank you, Mark. That's a great start. Casey Lewis, who is Mark's colleague in SAG-AFTRA, is going to tell us what's going on with them.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. Also a member of SAG-AFTRA and Actors' Equity, but as has been said, I'm speaking on SAG-AFTRA. First, SAG. In the 1930s, the movie stars thrived in the industry. They were still seen as property of the production companies and not always treated well. Regular working screen actors had no protections from exploitation. Actors worked unrestricted hours with no meal breaks, and there were few safety precautions. They were bound to long contracts, and those contracts could be bought and sold or traded. In 1933, a group of established actors, all members of Actors' Equity, formed the Screen Actors Guild. Their meetings were held in secret because they risked losing their contracts and with the production companies and their future in the industry. They persevered, and SAG won recognition from the producers in 1937. That same year, something similar happened in the field of radio, where there were also no protections. In August of 37, a group of radio performers in New York wrote the charter for the American Federation of Radio Artists, AFRA. Membership quintupled by December, and AFRA won its first contracts with CBS and NBC the next year. In 1952, AFRA merged with the Television Authority to become AFTRA, and was the first performers union to have health and retirement benefits in 1955. SAG-AFTRA had been talking about merger since their inceptions. After two failed merger votes in 98 and 2003, they finally merged in 2012. SAG-AFTRA represents performers and broadcasters in television, theatrical film, broadcast journalism, commercials, radio and TV programs, sound recordings, audiobooks, corporate and educational programs, games, and new media. The Twin Cities local, our local, covers Minnesota, North Dakota, and South Dakota, and has about 650 members. I also want to share that after the pandemic had shut down industries around the world, SAG-AFTRA, IATSE, DGA, and the Teamsters organized to create guidelines that allowed our industry to reopen safely.
Great, thank you, Casey. Next, we're going to hear from Kelly Larson from the IATSE local. Kelly?
Hi y'all. My name is Kelly Larson, and I am a representative of IATSE, which is the union that represents technicians behind the camera and on stage. IATSE stands for the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees, Motion Picture Technicians, Artists, Allied Crafts of the United States, Territories, and Canada. IATSE was founded in 1893 when representatives of stagehands working in 11 cities met in New York and pledged each other's efforts to establish fair working wages and working conditions for their members. Today, IATSE represents all forms of live theater, motion picture, television production, trade shows, exhibitions, live TV broadcasting, concerts, as well as the equipment and the shops and the construction that goes behind supporting the entertainment industry. We are more across the country in its territories. We are more than 150,000 workers strong in all arts, media, entertainment crafts. And of course, our mission, just like everybody else has said, is to improve the working conditions of our folks. My name is Kelly. We went over that, I guess. I am the business agent for IATSE Local 490 here in the Minnesota area. My jurisdiction covers the entire state of Minnesota, including Duluth and the Iron Range. My colleagues are on the call today, and I'm very excited that they are. We have more than one IATSE local in the Twin Cities area. We have a broadcasting union local, which is IATSE affiliated, and we have a live entertainment local, which is IATSE Local 13. And Matt Twilliger is on the call today from that local. And if you have any entertainment questions, Matt Twilliger is going to be able to answer those. I just represent motion pictures and television here in the Twin Cities. I was fortunate to come in kind of at the end of the tax incentive. I didn't have to do any of the heavy lifting. I kind of got passed on that information and got connected with Bill and Casey right away. And they've been critical in helping me understand what the motion pictures industry looks like in Minnesota. And I think with that, I might go back to Peter, if that's okay.
Great. Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you.
So, about 2 weeks ago, if you were reading carefully in your local newspapers, you might have seen that scene shop workers at the Guthrie Theater had just unionized. And we're fortunate today that Pat Landers is with us from United Scenic Artists Union, which has just had this successful organizing campaign at the Guthrie. Pat?
Thank you, Peter. Hi, friends. My name is Pat Landers. I'm a business representative with United Scenic Artists, Local USA 829 of the IATSE. Local USA 829 is a local union of the IATSE that represents designers and scenic artists throughout the United States, working in theater, opera, dance, live events, scene shops, motion pictures and television, commercials, and more areas. We are a nationwide local. We have offices in New York City, Chicago, Los Angeles, and several other representatives that are regionally based throughout the United States. We have approximately 5,000 members, and we became chartered as a local shortly after the first IATSE local started. So we, like the IATSE, are just over 125 years old, and Local USA 829 has been representing professional artists that whole time. Our local actually has many members based in the Twin Cities, working primarily as designers across the US and Canada, and as well as designing for Twin Cities theater companies, including the Guthrie Theater, Children's Theater Company, Minnesota Opera, Mixed Blood Theater, and the Jungle Theater. Further to that, as Peter shared with us, I'm so excited to join you this week because earlier this week, on Tuesday, as a matter of fact, the scenic artists working at the Guthrie Theater voted and unanimously decided to join and be represented by United Scenic Artists Local USA 829 in their work at the Guthrie Theater. So this is the perfect ending to the perfect week here to join in all of you and share in the coalition building and the community that is only increasing and growing day by day. So thanks a lot, Peter.
Thank you, Pat. Thanks for joining us. And thanks for giving us something to celebrate at a time when it feels like there's not much to celebrate. Brad Egan is president of Twin Cities Musicians Union, and he's going to tell us a little bit about them.
Thank you, Peter. And first of all, hats off to the Eastside Freedom Library for providing this resource. It's extraordinary. My name is Brad Egan. I'm the president of the Twin Cities Musicians Union. I'm a trumpet player who worked his way through perhaps too many years of college, playing with various types of show bands, orchestras, solo work in churches, a variety of different things. And for the last 33 years, I've been the elected president of the Twin Cities Musicians Union. The Twin Cities Musicians Union is a chapter of the American Federation of Musicians. That federal organization in Canada and the United States has perhaps 80 to 90,000 members. Our local has 1,200 members, which is actually fairly sizable for the size of our metropolitan area. We take pride in the idea that this is an arts mecca. I think a lot of the unions would share that impression. And people come to our community to be wage earners and sustain the art scene here. We have members that work as your daughter's wedding band, corporate parties, recording artists, members of the major orchestras, theater musicians at the Guthrie and the Jungle Theater and Theater La Di Da and the Children's Theater and the Chanhassen Dinner Theater. The major orchestras are extraordinarily competitive, so I get to work with tremendous talent. And just to give you a little focus on what it takes to get into this kind of an organization. Years ago, there was an opening in the orchestra bass section for the Minnesota Orchestra, not the principal, not the assistant principal, not the associate principal, but a member in the section. 200 people United States wide applied. These are people with master's degrees in bass with years and years of experience. 36 were invited to come here and audition behind a screen. They narrowed it down to 2 people. And then they asked those people on their own dime to come back in front of the audition committee. Now the screen's gone, and they listened to them back and forth again. And at the conclusion, they came to the result that they needed to open auditions again to find somebody who had the talent and skill and would be the right fit with the orchestra. That's how competitive some of these positions are. And as you know, the Minnesota Orchestra is an internationally recognized orchestra. The St. Paul Chamber Orchestra, with a similar level of competition, is internationally recognized, a Grammy Award-winning orchestra. The Minnesota Opera Orchestra used to be a freelance orchestra 30 years ago. It's now been recognized as a national and international organization. So I get to work with these people and work on collective bargaining agreements to look out for their interests. I could talk a long time because I have a lot of passion for these folks, but I'll turn it back to Peter.
Great, thank you, Dave. And
That was Brad.
Brad, I'm sorry. I just want to mention in our capacity as a library that we're honored to have Julie Ayer's book, More Than Meets the Ear, which is a great book to read to learn more about the unionization of musicians here in the Twin Cities. So we're going to go back now to Bill Hendrickson, who's going to tell us about this idea that doesn't have a name, the caucus, coalition, whatever. But tell us about the action, Bill.
Yeah. So there's, it's so brand new that, like I said, there's not a name, there's not anything, but there is an idea, and that is that, you heard like the amount of specialty of these jobs, and I especially think of IATSE, which seems to be kind of the common thread in there's some hardcore specialty that it takes a lot to make people look good and sound good, and to make sure the sets are right and everything is it takes a lot of this stuff, a lot of effort from a lot of talented folks, and a lot of times because of this, when our when SAG-AFTRA members are on set, the members think about hitting their marks and delivering the lines, and everybody's really focused on what they do, and same thing with IATSE, right? It's getting the shot right, getting everything done right. And that goes to set carpenters and electricians and drivers. And with this, degree of kind of perfectionism that these folks as workers have, sometimes we don't take the time to look around and realize that everybody else on this set is a worker. Movies, especially movies and TV shows, are one of the most heavily unionized segments of workers in the United States. Like any major motion picture you've seen, that's pretty much every single job that was done on that is going to be a union job. But we don't always remember to look around. And so one of the things I was struck by with the Chicago Entertainment Industry Labor Council was the amount of visibility that it increased, and that's, I think, the first thing that I think about for this this caucus is a place for the workers from all these different unions and a lot of smaller locals, just because of the specialty, to get together, to have a representative of them to participate, to let us know like what's happening with your local, what's happening around, and we'll find that these are, these employers we all negotiate contracts with the same employers, and the employers, we say this a lot, the employers are organized, and we need to be more organized. And so it's one way of doing that. We increase our visibility among ourselves to help us see each other as workers, and just recognize that dignity that all of the work that we're doing has. The second main thing I think that this caucus could do is increase solidarity. And the first part is seeing each other, but then after that, it's having those worker to worker talks, those union member to union member talks, where we kind of realize the common cause that we have. And I think that this caucus can help us with those kind of things. And the main engine for that action is going to be coordinated activity. When I look at the CEILC in Chicago, it is, I know folks from the communications workers, from the News Guild, from all these unions, because I see them on the line. There's an action, say the music artists are having an action at the opera, and it's the strangest thing that I met so many good friends of mine from other unions in Chicago at the opera, and a picket line outside the opera. But nonetheless, it's a fancy sounding way to have met a lot of good people. And those folks that are doing that work, we don't think about opera singers as workers, but they are. Going back to Mark's quote, they absolutely are. And so that's, for me, the real guts of this this caucus is going to be coordinated activity, being on the line for each other. And we're looking at a statewide state of Minnesota. So it might not be everybody can be on everybody's line, but maybe somebody in Moorhead, there's a production that needs tweets, that needs some aspect of a social media campaign. It's by being able to see each other more, we can help with all of that stuff. And we've seen the digital picket line is a real thing that, SAG-AFTRA, especially our public media stations, have used it very effectively. I don't know if anybody on Instagram or Twitter follows the campaign for the NPR, Minnesota Public Radio music unions. That's a fairly new SAG-AFTRA shop. Minnesota Public Radio, the main body, was organized a few years ago, and they employed it. And National Public Radio in Washington, D.C. has been really expert in deploying this social media strategy. And we've seen it work, and we want to be able to kind of share tips on what worked for us and what didn't, and hear from the other unions in the state that are in this line of work, because a lot of us, we have the same kind of core constituency as far as the folks that are going to listen to our tweets. If you're going to tune into the tweets or the Instagram posts from one IA local, it'll probably be from another one as well, or you're likely to listen to what the musicians have to say, or the actors, or the broadcast journalists. So that's a big part of it. And then what we saw during the tax credit battle was legislatively, we have a lot of strength. We would connect with other IATSE locals around the state. We would connect with other shops, and it was great to do that. But it's even better if this is a thing we have it. It's an ongoing thing, and so as much as it was great getting to know everybody for the first time, it would be even better if we all just knew each other, and we're all kind of in the nicest possible way, in each other's business, and looking out for one another. There were people said Brian Simpson from IATSD would send me just random news articles. He would text, and he still does. And when he thinks it's something that's applicable to SAG-AFTRA, he'll just shoot me a text with it, and it's great to kind of formalize that. So that out of the way, there are goals for this group. The method is pretty basic. We are trying to gather together any unions, reps from unions in Minnesota that work in the entertainment industry or media, and it's really a broad definition. We're not even to the point where we're narrowing our scope. If that's like a self definition. If you think that your union works somewhere within the entertainment industry, we want you. And we talked to the AFL-CIO, and they're going to assign a staff person to help facilitate this initial discussion to figure out what this is even going to be. But for right now, we want to keep it really open, and whatever form the caucus takes, we want it to be what it needs to be to represent workers in Minnesota in these fields. So we're going to keep it open, and we'll allow for segmentation and specialization and growth. And it would be great if we had so much work here that we actually had to specialize this or formalize this even further. And we're going to leave that possibility open. That's the nuts and bolts of what we're looking to do. And we're looking for a ton of input from everybody. This is a thing that we've SAG-AFTRA and IATSE kind of took some of the initial steps, just because it's a thing we saw in another place. But we're by no means running the show. We want just a flat structure where everybody's voice is heard, and the organization does what it needs to. Thanks.
Thanks, Bill. Maybe you could put your contact information in the chat if anybody wants to follow up with you. It's interesting to me and kind of a little bit frustrating that while we are here today having this conversation in part about solidarity, that our brothers and sisters in CWA Local 7250 have a picket line protest this afternoon, this very time while we're here, representing workers at Direct Stream TV and AT&T, and AT&T has been doing some pretty shady stuff. Oh, here I go, Dave, mentioning a particular employer, but they're doing some shady stuff, and CWA 7250 is trying to call them on it and raise public awareness about it. And I think that a week ago or 2 weeks ago, we had a great program with workers from the 4 half-price bookstores that have unionized in the metro area in the last couple months. And to a person, they testified about how important it was to have the support of customers, how important the conversations were with customers, how important it was that customers came into the store and said to management, "We're here to shop today because this is now a unionized store." So this solidarity can move in and should move in many directions across the unions that are represented here, other unions like CWA that represent workers in other parts of the industry, and directly to the people who buy tickets or purchase streaming services to gain access to the wonderful cultural work that you all create. So I think we're a small enough group. Bailey, why don't we go to gallery view and let everybody show up on one page, one screen, and let me invite you all to unmute. Bailey, if you would give them the capacity to unmute, please. And if you would like to ask a question of someone you've heard from or testify to something that's going on in your workplace or your union, raise a hand, and I will use my teacherly skills to call on you. Yes, Matt Waldron, please.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? So I'm actually the IATSC 745 president, and I've been a president for a whole month. It's been a really long month. It's nice to meet you all. We had an incredible showing of solidarity yesterday. And it was one of the things, it's something that's never happened here in this union, as far as I know. And I think we've been around for about 14 years now. At the Target Center, we had a major issue. And what happened yesterday, we bought these t-shirts. If anybody knows Charlie Cushing, he's our business agent. He had this great idea because one of our members was unfairly targeted and they took his credential away. The guy was a 22-year-old utility. And the amount of support that every single one of our workers showed to him yesterday, we wore these banana peel t-shirts because he got his credential taken away because he threw a banana peel away in the wrong garbage. Literally what it was. It was unbelievable why they did it. And everybody stood together, wore those t-shirts, and for 4 hours, we made our employer, Bally Sports North, literally sweat. And they caved. They caved at lunchtime because they didn't think we were coming back. We all went out to lunch together. We all took pictures, and everybody celebrated. It was an amazing experience, and I can't even believe this happened in my first month. So I can't wait to see what happens going forward. I thought I'd share. Thank you.
So they took this individual back.
They did. They gave his credential back, and we were kind of at war with the Target Center there for a little while too, because they took our bathroom privileges away. They turned the lights off on somebody that was on a scaffold or on a ladder that was 22 feet high when he was setting up his equipment. So we had all sorts of issues happening at the same time related to this first issue because we weren't backing down. So all of those were resolved yesterday.
Wow.
It was amazing.
So, thank you, Matt, for sharing that. And as someone who has studied and written and taught labor history, when we talk, and all of you presented today talking about the 1890s or the strike of 1919 or what happened in the 1930s, these are all contexts within which things happen. And we're now in the context of the pandemic. But I think labor scholars like to talk about filing a grievance and going to arbitration or direct action. And I'm in no position to say this is what you should always do. But it's pretty interesting that you all went for direct action yesterday and you got results.
Well, we did try diplomacy for a month and we got nowhere with it. And everybody got fed up. So when the crew gets fed up, action's taken.
Thank you, Matt. Andy, your paw is up, please.
Hi, everybody. I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Andy Snope. I'm a business representative with IBEW Local 292. IBEW is the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, and the IBEW represents about 775,000 people across the United States and Canada. And here in Minneapolis and Points West, we represent about 4,200 members. Of that, within kind of our media structure, We represent one person at the U of M Radio and Broadcast Technicians Group. Just got done negotiating that contract. It was a unanimous vote to accept that contract. We represent 20 people at the Twin Cities Public Television, mostly in their St. Paul studios. We've got 48 people at Fox, and I'm assuming that's out in Eden Prairie. Those are senior technicians and film and or video folks and news photographers. I believe they're kind of the freelance news photographers there. 16 people at WCCO TV. Currently, we're negotiating a contract with them. I believe the negotiations are going well, even though that they seem to be kind of slow. We just recently did a counter offer with them and kind of are awaiting what will happen there. But that would be kind of our nearest action if one were to happen. At the Star Tribune, I know it's a different kind of media, print media. We have 9 people that are technicians / electricians that get that newspaper out every day. And then we just recently organized a group at Wolfpack Promotions. That's a promotional and print media. They're a very small shop in North Minneapolis and are always looking to get a little new business. That was an interesting organization through some of the community events that we do. We just made friends with folks up in North Minneapolis. They started attending our barbecues and raised their hand and said, hey, we want to be represented. And we took them on. So that was kind of a fun organizing event. And that's it. I'm happy to be here and part of this. I was kind of brought in here with Bill Hendrickson's idea of kind of creating a caucus. Though we represent very few people, I think it would be a great experience to be a part of. So thank you.
Thanks, Andy. And I just want to say that 292 is one of the few unions locally that has a labor history committee. And before the pandemic, we're showing films and having conversations about labor history. And also, even though the union is the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, there's a very active women's caucus in 292. There are things we all can learn from each other, even if we have bargaining units with one person or 9 people. Great that you're here, Andy. Thank you. Anyone else? Questions, testimonies? Brad Egan, please.
Thank you. I hope this is an issue of interest to the people that are participating. One thing that I slighted a little bit in my introduction to our local union is that we have an extraordinary pool of what might be characterized as theater musicians. But one of them is here participating, Dave Graff, first of all, trombone player, but there are extraordinary people that come to this community because of the theater scene. We've had to fight technology changes over time. Some acts would come into town like the Rockettes did years ago with tape instead of hiring the local orchestra or even touring with an orchestra like they had in the past. And we were standing out in front with a sign that said 26 legs and a boombox. And they have not come back with tape since that time. So it was a productive force. Long ago, people said, well, we can figure out a way to tour without having to hire musicians. We can create a small group of musicians, but supplement it with recorded tracks. And that was a fiasco for the touring shows for many years. They would be in the middle of a soliloquy or a woman singing a beautiful operatic piece and a marching band would suddenly come in the background by mistake. But they've got the technology down. Apple, Disney are recording tracks out of the country in Germany. They're touring with orchestras on what is called key comp. When Frozen came to the Orpheum about 2 years ago, they had 22 live musicians. When they came in the last time, they had 11 musicians and these recorded tracks from non-union people in Germany that are getting paid on the cheap to create these tracks that fake out the audience. It's a process of dumbing down your audience, and the audience can be fooled. I had a friend years ago who went to Les Mis and you couldn't see the pit. And he said, Brad, I got just call you. I know we played in the band together in high school. I just got to call you and tell you that musical sound down there was just great. And he should have known better. I said, well, it was 6 synthesizers and none of our local people. So 20 people lost their jobs. And if it had been handled properly, you would have recognized the difference. So that's a major concern we have, losing work in the theater music business.
I wonder, thank you, Brad. I wonder, maybe Pat, if you would say a bit about what it was that led the scenic shop workers at the Guthrie to organize.
Certainly. Yeah. So the scenic artists at the Guthrie were, I think, really the only backstage department that did not have representation. So the carpenters, the lighting department, the costume shop, the wardrobe department, everybody else had representation. And the pandemic really brought to light some of the issues and problems that can arise when you do not have representation. As a business representative, and those of us who do serve as business representatives, the pandemic has been remarkable for so many reasons, but one of those things was from a contract standpoint, negotiating the shutdown of the entertainment industry, then negotiating the safety procedures, like the nationwide procedures that Casey mentioned, and then when the various industries started coming back, we had to negotiate the restart of the industries to do everything we could to keep our workers as safe as possible. Anyway, in the course of all of these things, employers, including the Guthrie, had to make tough decisions, and some of those decisions were harmful to the workers. And without any representation, there's nobody behind you to negotiate, to represent you, to mitigate the damage even. And that was, I think, one of several issues that really brought to light their need for representation, because they're looking at their colleagues in the various other backstage departments at the Guthrie, who are having the terms of the shutdown and the restart and all of these things negotiated by their business agents, and they did not have that same treatment. So they just, it was very obvious. So they reached out, and that was there are several other issues. Scenic artists, like many of the workers we represent, also deal with the idiosyncrasies of a freelance workforce, a temporary workforce. I mean, employment guarantees can be 1 day at a time. They might be 8 months at a time, but trying to deal with those kind of nuances and still maintain your work as a professional in the entertainment industry, and doing all the things you need to do as a freelance worker to piece together your full-time living, it's tough to do. And without representation, it's even tougher. There's just such a lack of consistency from one employer to the next. And so all of these issues combined, and the pandemic enlightened them. So that's where we are here. Thanks.
I have a question.
Yes, please, Dave Graff.
Hi, Pat. I was interested to learn that the scene shop workers weren't unionized. That came as a surprise to me. I didn't know that. Our union currently has a grievance filed against the Guthrie Theater for using recorded music that went completely bypassed our local members. They farmed it out to some composer in New York. We haven't been able to determine that it was involved any AFM members. And I was wondering if we heard that there was a grievance against the Guthrie for farming out set building somewhere out east, I think Cincinnati or someplace. And I was wondering if that was a result of organizing the scene shop workers, or if that happened before, or We were interested in that, of course, because we're kind of in that same boat right now.
Sure. Thanks, Dave. So I want to clarify a couple of things. Specifically, the unrepresented workers at the Guthrie were the scenic artists. So
Okay.
the rest of the shop, the carpenters and welders that fabricate scenery and props, those workers did have representation through IATSE Local 13. I'm aware of the subcontracting issue that you mentioned, but that was being handled by Local 13.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think
you.
Matt may be able to answer that question for you a little bit more clearly, David, since he is the one that negotiates those contracts for Local 13 through the Guthrie.
I think, Matt, you've been called on.
All right. Yeah, we did work through that outsourcing grievance. Our outsourcing contract language is not as strong as we might have hoped when we really dug into it. So we ended up not getting any monetary compensation for the carpenters, but we were able to do some things that got a bunch of open positions filled. So like they had been short-staffed. We were able to pressure them into posting and actually hiring those open positions much faster than I think they would have. So the real outcome ended up being that we were able to restore the staffing in the scene shop back to where it had been pre-pandemic, which I think would have drug out for many months longer without that sort of pressure. Yeah, so but they did outsource a couple of pieces that they determined were absolutely vital to the show. I may not quite agree. I think I remember the last time they built a new Christmas Carol, and they were in a similar sort of way behind position, and they made a different set of choices and built the full show over 3 seasons instead of outsourcing it, which I think turned out just fine and would have been a better choice this time around. But that's where we ended up.
So there's a question that's come in on Facebook about choreographers and directors. An organization with the acronym SDC. Can any of you tell us a little bit about that? And are they in these conversations that Bill and the caucus idea that you all are trying to generate? Are they in the conversation too, though they're not here today? Mark Bradley, please.
Yeah, the Society of Directors and Choreographers is a union insofar as they do, as I understand it, they promulgate contracts. I don't know if they're affiliated with the AFL-CIO. I found on their website about 30 local members of the group. And it would be interesting to ask rank and file people, especially equity members, what they would think, because on this list are a lot of people who are managing directors of the theaters. So they are properly seen as management, as well as people who are freelance directors and choreographers. So yes, we're certainly aware of that group. I don't think they were invited today, and I think that was I voiced the concern that rank and file members may see them as management and conflict of interest kind of thing.
Kelly, I see you nodding. Is there anything you want to add to what Mark has said?
No, I think Mark did a really great job of like talking about how the difference, like, you know, it's interesting when you think about unions and you think about guilds and like the cinematographer or like the choreographer and directors guild is typically seen as employers, right? They're not affiliated with the AFL-CIO. They are a guild, you know, and we are especially in motion pictures industry, there's a movement right now happening where producers are trying to organize, and they've come to me and asked me like, what do you think about this? And I'm like, well, you're employers, so I'd be interested to see if the AFL-CIO does pick you up. You know, like, you're not a rank and file worker. So I just wanted to like echo, you know, there are guilds, there are directors guilds, and there are producers guilds that don't get or don't have the same protections, and they view organizing as like either something that they don't have and they want it, you know, like they see how our contracts protect the rank and file workers. So it's been interesting to me to watch some of these directors and some of these producers and some of these folks that we do view as management try to organize for better wages and work conditions for themselves. So that's the only
Thank you. Yeah. When we did the program with the bookstore workers who have organized with UFCW 1189 and 663, some of them testified to the way stores created job titles that made it appear as if people were management, and there was confusion about, are they in the bargaining unit or not? And I mean, we live in a society with a complicated ladder of hierarchies, and people have some power, more power, less power. It's interesting to think about the ways that when we see who ultimately controls the purse strings, how we can bring people together. Thanks. Casey, you've got your hand up, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on that with some of the conversations we've had with the Minnesota AFL-CIO, and touch on some of the stuff Bill said that's relating to this. As he mentioned, we have spoken to the AFL-CIO, we have their support, we have their blessing. Kara in St. Paul, the St. Paul Fed has actually already offered their space for us to meet. They love the idea, much like they got behind the film production tax incentive when we reached out to them. They understood very quickly what is, what helps one group in labor helps all groups in labor, especially with the jobs that the film incentive can create. But specifically in regards to this caucus and our question, and this is for anybody who's watching now, anybody who watches this in the future. Teamsters is not affiliated with the AFL-CIO, but they are welcome to be part of this caucus. And we've spoken to Trevor over there, and he's on board. And back to something that Bill said in that the name of this organization and any other details and our focuses and priorities is going to be defined by the caucus. And the caucus would decide here or there whether another labor organization would be a part of the caucus if there was a question as to, if they are management, if they hold the purse strings, that would be determined by the caucus. But it is the caucus that would make that determination, and it's and that communication is open to be had. So I wanted to put that out there, and I think that's all I had to say on that. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Casey. I wanted to ask Matt about this action with the T-shirts, and did you interact with the public while you were doing this, and what did people say to you?
So there wasn't really much interaction with the public. They would have said something to us had it gotten closer to game time and we still had the T-shirts on. People wonder why everyone's wearing a banana peel on the back of their T-shirt. And that was the last thing the team wanted and the last thing that our employer wanted. They actually physically went up to a few of our cameramen and asked them to take their shirts off, and they did not. They did not until we all agreed upon to do it when our demands were met. So there wasn't any interaction with public.
Thank you.
I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
Great. Others, questions, comments? Casey, have you put your, oh, wait, let's go Mark Bradley first, please. Mark.
Yeah, just picking up a little bit on what the story that Brad was talking about, made me think of some examples of how we can help each other. I can't remember what year it is, but there was a musician strike on Broadway, and it was the same issue that Brad talked about. That's what made me think of it, is they wanted to bring in recorded music for Broadway, for heaven's sake. And the actors, I can't remember if they actually walked or if they threatened to walk, because the whole point is it's supposed to be live entertainment, and everything you see and hear should be performed live for you. And so that was one of the things that got it settled. And then that made me think, going back more than 20 years to the commercial strike that SAG and AFTRA, this was before we merged, were striking the commercials industry. And that went on for 6 months. And one of the things that got it settled was IATSE said, this is stupid. We're going to go out if you don't settle. So there's all kinds of opportunities, and all we need is a little bit of communication so that we know what's going on. Because some of the things I've heard today were new to me. Matt, the Waldron story, that was new. It was great. What a wonderful story. You know, and maybe in the future we can have sort of more wide-ranging discussions, but my personal opinion is that we really should be an industrial union, and not a collection of craft unions. And Peter, of course, is an expert in all of those terminologies and things, but short of actually merging us all together, I think that we need to take every opportunity to help each other, because it's been my observation over the years that management knows how much power we have, and we often don't.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Casey?
Yeah, that's something that, following up with Mark said, that's something that's come up in conversations we've had with individual representatives, and that's come to mind in the conversation today, in that as a group we have more power, and specifically in regards to whatever. I hate to keep going back to the film incentive, but that's the perspective that I have thus far in my organizing experience. What benefits SAG-AFTRA performers when it comes to a film incentive also benefits members of Actors Equity who are not SAG-AFTRA performers, because there are opportunities created there. The opportunities that are created for members of IATSE who are crew for film also can benefit stagehands, because there's crossover skills. There are jobs to be had when these productions come to Minnesota. Electricians, construction workers. That's how Minnesota AFL-CIO quickly keyed into the importance of their support behind our efforts. But if there's ever anything where the scenic designers are experiencing issues with management and things just aren't going, they just can't get the inertia behind it. That's what this caucus is for. Everybody to come and support them. If the musicians are having issues that they can't get leverage behind, again, that's what this group is for. I'm sure everybody here understands that, but because it's come up in a few conversations, I wanted to stress that here as well for this group who's a part of the conversation, for anybody who's watching on Facebook, or anybody who sees this down the line with each of these organizations posting it and sharing. We are united and here for each other, because something like this just does not exist in Minnesota, and should, as Bill said. We're smaller independently, but we're larger and stronger together. So I wanted to reiterate that. What are your issues are our issues, and we're there for you in this caucus.
Thank you, Casey. I mean, all this, whether this goes in the direction, as Mark Bradley was saying, of an industrial union, at least it strikes me in labor history, the connection with the motto, an injury to one is an injury to all, and how that can inform our work, whether we're all in the same organization or not, if we're committed to feeling an injury to one is indeed an injury to all. Sandra, please.
Hi there. My question is for Bill, if he doesn't mind taking one. You said earlier the idea for this came from something you saw similar somewhere else, and I was wondering if that was something that you'd be able to maybe elaborate on a little bit more, please.
Yeah, it's in Chicago. A lot of the other larger cities in the United States with a much more active like motion picture industry have this, but my experience was in Chicago. Yeah, the CEILC. It's this basically it's the same thing we're talking about. It's this they get together quarterly and over pizza. It's very collegial. It's more formal, and so they have actual elected officers and things of that nature. But it started out much less formally, and so I am based in Chicago, and I will attend. I drop in on the meetings when I can, and yeah, it's just seeing just the level of camaraderie among folks from all these other unions, and that I know if there's an issue, who to call. I know, like, oh, that I got to call Dave for that. I got to call Mike for that. I got to call Joanne for that. And it's just great that everybody kind of knows each other. And it's especially since the CineSpace, the big motion picture studio that they built in Chicago, that just even further brings everyone together. It's a common workplace where so much of this stuff, the movies and TV shows are made, and so, but that's one cool thing with is that these crafts that normally don't have they have interaction professionally but not always personally. Now there's also kind of like a workplace, and so the Teamsters are the drivers there, there's set carpenters, electricians, there's jobs I didn't even understand existed, but are actually a key part of how I experience movies and TV shows. So yeah, that's our that's kind of the background on it. But I wanted to be careful when I brought the idea up to Mark and Casey and to Kelly that we don't bring over too much. We need it to be what it is here. I don't want to take like a whole set of rules from some other place and graft it on. And there's nothing more arrogant than some dude who was raised in Iowa who lives in Chicago thinking he can tell people in Minnesota what's what. It's more that I need to, it's got to be what Minnesota needs it to be. And I'm happy to share any, notes and things like that I've seen, but mostly I'm excited to be part of the process of facilitating this, and that's how it's going to be strong.
Thank you.
I'd like to actually add to
Sure.
the answer with Sandra's question. When Mark and Bill and I were working on the tax incentive effort, obviously we were studying other areas, other states' markets on what they had done, and we wanted to meet with a colleague in Georgia who has been a part of their tax incentive work since before it existed. And they've been, I guess, up and running for 15 years thereabouts. And it wasn't what it is now. They just did not have the market on the market in the way that they do now. And one of the things that this colleague in Georgia, SAG-AFTRA member, had said was that when the tax incentive passed there, one of the first things they did was they got entertainment related labor folks together to create a group that would then reach out to all of the chambers of commerce throughout the state and they got representatives in each of those chambers of commerce as their point contact person that they would stay in touch with and communicate to them the importance of a state tax incentive like Georgia had just passed, because that creates an industry. It creates an existing industry and plops it right down in another location, jobs, etc. And that was one of the key factors that helped grow their incentive. They organized behind that effort. And that was one of the things that stood out to us with something that would be interesting for us to do in regards to that particular legislation. And then the communication grew to the Chicago group that Bill's been speaking on today. But that's just one example of the type of organizing and the germination of our idea with the creation of this caucus, which has obviously now grown beyond entertainment and included media, because our members, specifically one of them who's here, Steve Simpson, is a broadcast journalist with WCCO. So we clearly would like to help broadcast journalists too. So that's when we said media and entertainment. So I wanted to toss that into the blender with Sandra's question.
Thank you, Casey. Wu Chen, did we lose you to a childcare issue? I suspect.
Functionally.
Are you good?
No, you go ahead and move on. I'm still listening, but go ahead.
Because I know you want it in. I don't want to bypass you.
Go ahead. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. Pat?
Thanks, Peter. So our recent discussion about the Society of Directors and Choreographers and Bill's comments on his experiences with the Chicago Entertainment Industry Labor Caucus, I just wanted to share a couple of other things. Like I said in my introduction, United Scenic Artists is a local union with nationwide craft jurisdiction. And I'm actually based out of our office in New York. I'm originally from the cities, but I'm in New York now. And in New York, there are a couple of similar coalitions of the entertainment industry unions that the United Scenic Artists has partnered with, and many members of some of the other unions that we have represented here in this meeting are part of this. So the first one I just wanted to mention, on Broadway, there's a group called COBUG, the Coalition of Broadway Unions and Guilds, and it's comprised of all the different IATSE locals, and it's also comprised of SDC and Actors Equity, and even the International Union of Operating Engineers, because the IUOE represents the building engineers in the theaters. So it's pretty much anybody and everybody who works in that building is represented in this coalition. And the information sharing and the support that this coalition can provide to the stakeholders has been invaluable. One thing that we enjoy in the entertainment industry is the inherent sense of collaboration. All of our mediums, theater, movies, it's all a collaborative effort. No one department can put on a play or film a movie. So that's an obstacle that generally we don't really even have to overcome. And, contentious contract negotiations that one group is experiencing, there are a lot of shared experiences there with other groups. Recently at the Metropolitan Opera, there have been some incredibly contentious contract negotiations. And so this COBUG group just sort of expanded to include a couple of other worker representative groups and locals that represent workers at the Met. So it was invaluable. I have to say one of the biggest, most valuable pieces of this became clear during the pandemic, and that is the support of one another for safety and health issues. Even outside of the pandemic, it has been important, but that just really illuminated that even more. So, issues of health and safety, you can almost guarantee that any one worker or any one union worker, all the union workers, all the workers are experiencing that same issue, because bad ventilation, it affects everybody in the place. Or, if we've got rodent problems, or if we've got, particularly bad broken apart staircases or something. That has been one of the greatest areas of success of this group in New York. And I think that certainly that could be of incredible value to a similar coalition here in the Twin Cities. In addition to the things that Casey and Kelly have mentioned about support for the film tax incentives, New York also has a substantial film tax incentive that is constantly under attack. You may have experienced this with the Minnesota film tax incentive too, but every time it gets strengthened and built up, there's another group of legislators or various constituency groups that are not interested in supporting it. So the various groups divide up the labor necessary to support it so that our workers can continue to be supported by those film tax incentives so that the ancillary industries can still have the job creation and services being purchased as a result of that. So the opportunity here for support of one another, but I just want to say the health and safety, I think that's probably one of the best ways this group will be able to collaborate. And, we're excited to be part of it now with our increased community presence in the Twin Cities. So thank you.
Thanks, Pat. Bill, did you had more you wanted? Please.
Yeah, there's just I just two very quick things is one is some of the frustrations that I've heard from everybody on this call is essentially their employers trying to find a way to replace them with a machine. And that goes, you think like how could you replace a symphony orchestra with a machine? Well, Brad showed us how. And I'm reminded of a commercial I saw touring, and this is not an endorsement, this is the opposite of it, but touring in Chicago is a Buddy Holly hologram and a Roy Orbison hologram. So even when we think about like, oh, well, they could never replace the actors, they most certainly are trying. And they maybe can't do it now, but they're certainly trying to do, and that goes for all of us. If there was a set designing robot, by God, they'd be ordering one of them. And so that's a very big thing that I think we can help with to fight off that. But one other thing, and I didn't mention this in my discussion of the caucus, is a lot of what we're looking at is this, protecting what we have. But I really see this caucus as being something that empowers our members. Say there's an IATSE crew at a broadcast news station. It's empowering them to reach out to the anchors, the journalists who would normally be SAG-AFTRA members, and say like, hey, there's a union. This is the union difference. And likewise for us, where we represent at a news station where we represent the on-air folks, for our on-air, the steward of our on-air, to talk to the folks on the technical side, to tell them, to at least keep that going, to help one another organize within those fields. One of our, if it's at a newspaper, if it's wherever, it's about keeping what we have, but also like really consciously focusing on organizing and working with the AFL-CIO organizing director Todd Dahlstrom to figure out those strategies. I really do think this is something we can leverage. Labor unions, their popularity is at an all-time high, and at an all-time high for the last half century, and at an all-time low in membership. And that's because the bosses are organized. So I just wanted to throw that out. This is, I think, I can't believe as a former organizer that I let organizing take this much of a back burner in my comments. So I apologize to my younger self.
Thank you, Bill. Wu Chen, do you want to speak?
Sure. I think that Taylor, what I'd love to ask about tails nicely into what you just said, Bill. Thank you very much. I guess first of all, I want to acknowledge like the importance of focus that has been mentioned before already, especially the idea of specificity and focus in organizing and building coalitions, right? Like that you really can't replace sort of hyper locality in terms of both regionality in both of industries, but also in terms of like cultural context of how you can be actually effective and not functionally showing up and causing any problems or anything else. So I don't want to name that, like, but I'm also very interested sort of in the broad, like the way the broader arts, media, and entertainment industry, right, like has all these very specific, as has been mentioned, idiosyncrasies to it, right? Like whether we're talking about the groups that we've talked about here, or whether we're talking about like AGMA or ABK, the way of acquisitions being used, whether it's in the theater, we saw that with Long Wolf, we saw that with Atlanta theaters. We're seeing it now with Microsoft acquiring Activision Blizzard, like literally 3 days after Kotick gets in trouble, right? And also like specificities of things like employee empowerment unionism, which is deeply embedded into sports unions, but also into like the stage unions, the stage union work in terms of the idea of an area rate being a minimum, that way that feeds into employee empowerment unionism. And I'm interested in knowing, like, sort of from an organizing standpoint, are there ideas of building resources which then could use our collective experience in these fields, in these points of assault upon our rights and our dignity, that can be used to really as a way of building solidarity, but also providing resources to a broader labor movement? Like, I'm thinking specifically about the ways that our industry, like the model of our industry across sports, entertainment, media, live theater, state film performance, ties in really directly in the way we're seeing like Uber, Lyft, Amazon build their industries, in the way, again, Amazon is working, not Amazon, Microsoft is working specifically with Activision Blizzard, but also in ways that some of the work that SEIU has been doing locally around organizing non-tenure track and adjunct faculty and staff in higher education, in the way that industry, that entire workforce, functionally now functions in almost exactly the same way that, say, a stagehand industry works. Like, you have no idea if you're going to have work next semester, which is functionally the same thing as tomorrow, right? Or even the next day. And that, you know, like, for instance, there's a place I'm working at right now where functionally there's one person who is tenured, and they get to call all the shots because the rest of us exist solely by their whim, right? Like, and SEIU has been organizing around that locally. And I'm just very interested to hear how this wisdom that lives in this space of this industry, the coalition of these unions and this caucus, are there plans or are there ways to leverage it to support a broader labor movement, again, without losing that hyper-local focus in a caucus, which would, of course, cause it itself to implode on its own way.
I can take a stab at. I think I don't know the specifics, but kind of much the way this idea came to us, like, I saw a good thing and I just stole it. And I think that if we focus on doing the best possible job, you know, organizing amongst ourselves internally, externally, you know, I think that if we can figure it out, or I should say when we figure it out, that, and sharing those successes, you know, through the AFL-CIO with other unions and just anybody that asks, you know, hopefully we can develop something that's strong enough that somebody else will want to steal from us. That's when you know you've made it. So that's, you know, without a lot of specifics, I think that it's just it really is focusing on what we do and doing it well.
Kelly, you want to contribute to this?
Yeah, just to kind of echo what Bill said, like, Bill kind of came to us and had said, this is an idea that we have. And, you know, me and Matt have been talking about trying to get entertainment unions together for a couple of years now. And so Bill then said, hey, this is an idea that we have. And Matt and I are like, okay, let's do it. Let's have fun, right? And then Casey kind of joined in. So, like, I love the idea, like, of the history and the knowledge that you have, but, you know, with those bigger locals or these bigger unions, you know, SEIU has and all of that, and Uber. And I think that there is a life, or I think there is a spot in our caucus or our coalition where we can start to talk about that in a broader stroke. And we can start to help the labor industry in the entertainment industry in a broader stroke. But right now, it's just such a new, this is all new for us. Like, I can't remember, and I look at Matt because Matt and I share an office a lot, so I drop Matt's name a lot. But I can't remember the last time all of the entertainment unions sat at the table in the Twin Cities area together to talk about something like this. I can't. I've only been in the Twin Cities for 15 years. And in my time, it hasn't happened, I don't think. I know that SAG and Equity kind of get together. And I know that all the local IATSC folk kind of get together every once in a while. But I don't think that, you know, having Brad on the call, you know, and having Brad in this caucus, and, like, it's the first time the entertainment unions have actually sat down together to talk about this type of thing. And this goes for, like, the country as well. You know, the pandemic really forced us to kind of come together as entertainment unions to talk about our safety and our rights on the job site, you know, and this is just a smaller version of that same continuing conversation. And if it wasn't for, you know, Bill and me and Matt having two separate ideas coming together, it wouldn't have happened at all. And if it wasn't for me being introduced to Bill at the very end of the tax incentive negotiations, I don't know if it would have happened. You know, I don't think I would have made that connection if Brian Simpson hadn't connected us in some way, you know. So I think that there is a space, Wu Chen, for that to happen. I really do. But right now we just have to kind of, it's so new for us to sit at the table and to support each other right now. I think that the conversation will evolve to that bigger idea that you had. Does that help answer or support that question a little bit?
I want to be clear. Like, I'm not saying why aren't you doing this now, right? Like, let's be super clear. My point is that there's, I guess what I was wondering is specifically to tag on to what Bill was saying, like from an organizer's perspective, the industry, our industry is our collective industry, which has been segmented and parceled out into these tiny little chunks, right? Like, it's for purposes of controlling us, has in itself been now the ideas and the ways that we've been used and abused by the elites is being sort of very largely broadly put out into other industries. Like, we see that, right? Like, you know, how many of us, people even I know, who've sat and like, oh, people talk about the gig economy, that's been our fucking lives for the last fucking like 40 years, right? 50 years, 100 years. Like, there's nothing fucking new about that shit, right? And so we know how to manage that. And so I'm not saying like, why aren't we doing this now? But like, I'm curious as to, what are ways that this could then be leveraged, not as to go out and immediately organize with Uber. That would not be cool. I mean, specifically in the ways Bill was talking about, that would not be cool. But that there is wisdom here that can be shared with people trying to organize and trying to live their lives because we've experienced it, for literally the reason IATSC was founded. That was my point.
Thank you. Mark Bradley?
Yeah, this is kind of an example of what we've been talking about with this whole idea that whatever this group decides to do or decides to become should grow organically out of what we say to each other. You know, there isn't even a name yet. So, you know, all of these things are great to talk about. And I think one thing that we have to overcome, I see it all the time with actors, is what's been called a ghetto mentality, that we think we're walled off into a specific area and nobody understands anything about us. Oh, here we are all, you know, in our own little worlds. And I think that one of the things that we're striving for here is that we widen our focus, we open our eyes to what's going on around us, and that people share our same issues. I mean, you're talking about safety. You know, it's my understanding that IATSE was founded in the 1890s because of safety. Equity organized Disney World actors because of safety, because they do a lot of pyrotechnics and stuff. So all of these issues affect us all. And it's just great to get together. And this is wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I mean, for me, I find myself a lot asking lately, do we really have a labor movement? You know, do we have a collection of unions? Is it really what is the difference between a collection of unions and a labor movement? And looking back in the past, and again, I'm struck by your presentations today, how many of your unions were born in periods of great social upheaval, and how that set a context for what happened. And there was movement that many people were involved in that then got manifested in particular organization and union organization. I wanted to share a story. Several weeks back, we did a program about the issue of police abolition and what's happening in the wake of ballot issue number 2 in Minneapolis having failed to pass. And, you know, were people despondent? Were people going back to the drawing board? And instead, we heard from 3 people who talked about ongoing grassroots work that was happening and was completely below the public radar. And one of the really exciting stories we heard, and now I have Matt Waldron's exciting story to add to my repertoire of exciting stories, but that predominantly African and African-American security guards who were rank and file members of SEIU Local 26 came to their local, and with the leadership of the local and these security guards, developed a project in North Minneapolis where security guards would share their knowledge with neighborhoods about how to de-escalate conflict, how to solve problems without calling the police, how to take care of things directly. And and I just thought, oh my God, that's exactly what, we need. And of course, it's happening in all kinds of places. And of course, the media doesn't share that information, share those stories with the wider public. So, one of the things that we have not mentioned yet today, as I look at all of you as from someone who's outside your industry, is the skills that you have to offer to other unions about how to communicate, how to tell their stories effectively, whether it's signs or t-shirts or songs or skits or innovative strategies that people haven't thought of. There's so much that the unions represented on this call today have to offer to the rest of, and again, I'm going to be cautious about using the term labor movement, but you have so much to offer. And I think, we're on the verge of teacher strikes in both cities. How are the teachers communicating? I mean, the issues that they're mobilizing around are incredibly important and valid issues. The Star Tribune and the Pioneer Press and CCO and even our beloved Minnesota Public Radio are probably not going to tell those stories in a way that tells what the teachers understand, what they see in the classroom and in the schools every day. You could do a tremendous job for the teachers. There are so many ways that you and your members have so much to offer to help us all. And so I just want to put in a pitch to think about that. And that's a way to build your relationship with the labor movement. Besides, think of the carpenters and the operating engineers and all of these unions that could benefit from having some ongoing relationships with you, your members, and your unions. So we're almost out of time now that I've been running my mouth.
I just want to say quickly
please.
on top of that, right? Like talking about the teacher strike here and coming the negotiations, and Ed Groff, the jackass and bullshit he's putting out in front of it. I will say that there are a number of stagehands, directors, scenic art theater artists, members who are members of AEA, members of IATC 13, and members of nurses of the nurses union here, who we've been working with the SPFT, the Minneapolis and St. Paul Teachers Federation, specifically around how we can craft and support them.
Great. Great.
In fact, I was about to call Matt in a little while and say, like, hey, we hit the picket line. Can I grab this flag? So.
Great. Anyone else, a parting comment? Well, I want to thank you all for taking the time to share stories and thoughts and wisdom and hope with us. Casey, please.
Just before you close it out,
Yeah.
I did want to thank everybody for being a part of this conversation. Those whom we have spoken to about the caucus and those we hadn't, please reach out to either myself, Mark, or Bill, or Kelly. And we will be reaching out to folks with upcoming meetings about the caucus whom we've already spoken to. Those of you who are watching this after this event, in the recorded form, if you feel that you are a part of an entertainment or media related labor group that you would like to be part of this caucus, please reach out to us. I just wanted to leave that invitation and thanks out to everybody who's participating live and participating in the recorded format. So sorry, Peter, go ahead.
No. Thank you, Casey. And again, to remind you that there will be a recording. Bailey will be editing that. That will be available through the Eastside Freedom Library YouTube, and I'll send a link to the video to everybody who's been involved. And as we've been learning in this pandemic and this era of Zoom, more people will watch a video after an event has happened than will be able to organize their lives to show up in real time. So let's use the video. I think that what we've heard today is really valuable and can be a useful resource as we spread these ideas. So thank you all, and stay safe, be ready to support the teachers and others who will be needing us. And again, Matt and Pat, thank you so much for real inspirational stories in this moment. It's so great to hear and to know that something better is possible and that we can make better things happen by working together. So thank you all, and see you soon.
Thanks for hosting, Peter.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.